About 30 years ago, two bands changed singers and then immediately produced albums that are considered immortal, whether it be in the hard rock department or the heavy metal department. Of course, I'm talking about Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden, and the band we're about to talk about today, ACDC with Back in Black. The band had to, of course, obviously find a replacement for Bon Scott considering his tragic death and got Brian Johnson. But that's the history lesson, and that's where it's going to end. So here in 2014, we're talking about ACDC with their new album, Rock or Bust. We may talk about Iron Maiden next year, or whenever the hell they put out their next studio album, but I never thought we'd talk about a new ACDC album, so this is definitely a nice surprise. ACDC is a band that many people say have been kind of doing the same thing ever since Back in Black was released, almost as though that was a quintessential turning point, and they just decided to try to replicate the result over and over and over again. But some albums just have a mystique. That's the reason why, if that were true, why Back in Black was able to sell, a couple times Diamond or something like that, I don't know. Whereas the albums that followed it only went platinum a couple of times, or maybe not even that. From the moment that Rock or Bust begins, from the moment that it starts, you feel like a first-time fan again. You feel like a first-time fan, and you understand something. You understand why. Why, especially if you've been a long-time fan, why we need a band like ACDC and an album like Rock or Bust here in 2014. Why we need it now. Different tone, different sound, different energy. An energy that feels antiquated to some. An energy that some people may not understand or may not enjoy. They may enjoy the Volbeats of the world. They may enjoy they may enjoy the Five Finger Death Punches or the Nickelbacks of the world, the One Republics, the One Directions of the world. They may consider that to be true energy because it's loud, because it's energetic, because it's poppy. But in reality, what about energetic, good old-fashioned, dirty rock and roll? That's something that all of this was founded upon. Rock or Bust indicates this, the track and the album. It indicates this to longtime fans, it indicates this to first-time listeners. It's an energy that's all its own, a unique one that doesn't sound like anything else that's on the radio today, one that may be mirrored by some bands that are on the radio today, or perhaps just some bands that are out there, but not one that sounds exactly the same. ACDC, they're unique. Dogs of War, though. Track 4, Dogs of War, on this album clearly indicates all of these things and magnifies them even further. I don't know if perhaps it's because of the song title, Dogs of War, because it seems like every single time this song title comes up, it is accompanied by a terrific, terrific track. Whether it be the Pink Floyd song, or the one that I'm thinking about the most, is the Saxon track. The Saxon track is an absolute classic. It's a gem. Definitely one of the best in their collection. It's huge. It's great. If you haven't listened to Saxon's Dogs of War, do it. It's definitely well worth it. But ACDC does the same thing. They're able to produce a great track, one that doesn't exactly sound like it's going too many places whenever it first gets started, but damn if it doesn't rip-roar its way right into where it needs to be. Really putting itself right in the same pantheon, right in that same place, along with the other great Dogs of War of the musical landscape. Man, oh man. You have Brian Johnson screeching like he always does. You have an infectious groove. You have a terrific solo. You have terrific percussion. Everything just comes together into one big ball of fucking energy. And these men that have been around the rock and roll landscape for 45 years, Brian Johnson 35 with this band, the rest of them even more aged than that, sound as though they are younger than most of us. They sound younger than I do. They have the energy, the force, the ability to convey that out, which is something that you can't say about a lot of the bands here in 2014. Some of the approaches feel very lazy. They feel very synthetic. It doesn't have a natural idealism to it. It's instead one that feels as though it exists principally to exist as some form of perfection, as opposed to being dirty and raw, as opposed to having a nice balance to it, as opposed to sounding like four mates jamming. Yeah, now ACDC may have some problems. One of their members may be very ill, one of the brothers, Malcolm. One of their members might be facing some significant jail time. Can't fucking tell that on this record. From Rock or Bust all the way to Admission Control, This is a rock fest. This is a rock concert. This is everything that you would expect from an ACDC album, which may play right into the hands of those who say that every ACDC album after Back in Black sounds the same. But I'll tell you what, rock or bust, it sounds a lot better than Stiff Upper Lip. Sounds a lot better than Black Ice. Maybe, just maybe, it's because here in 2014, we needed an ACDC album more than we needed an ACDC album whenever Black Ice was released. More than whenever Stiff Upper Lip was released. Not saying they shouldn't have released them, but we needed rock or bust more here in 2014. How is it that a couple weeks ago I can say that Nickelback doing the same thing is so terrible, but ACDC essentially doing the same thing is not only alright, but perfectly acceptable and needed, required? It's the tone. It's the sound. How many bands do you hear that have AC/DC sound on the radio? That dirty rock and roll? Bands such as Crowbot, but you don't hear them on the radio. Perhaps would be one that could emanate that in the future, but not like AC/DC. That what you hear on the radio doesn't have AC/DC quality to it. It's stymied by that rock and roll perfection, that production magic. And plus here in 2014, that's not who you're speaking about. Nickelback might be able to fill arenas with their assortment of songs, their simple melodies, and their ballads that go along with them. Songs that are able to kind of post-border around post-grunge and just straight-up rock and roll. Yeah, perhaps in their own right, it is acceptable. It sure doesn't sound like it, though. An AC/DC album, it sounds required. It sounds like a reminder. Like Nickelback have contemporaries in this era, in this age, almost as though this is Nickelback's time right now is AC/DC's time in the 1980s, or perhaps even going toward the end of the 1980s. Yeah, there's a great comparison point. Perhaps everyone was tired of it then. Maybe they weren't. Nickelback is a band that has contemporaries. It's a band that purveys the same principles as their contemporaries. There is a lot of production magic. And there is a formula. And it's one that's not as cut and dry as this. It's one that's actually a little more complex, considering they fuse in ballads, slower tracks. AC/DC comes forward and just rocks your face off for 45 minutes. There's the difference. AC/DC doesn't need to fuck around. AC/DC doesn't need the crap and the cheese. AC/DC just rocks your face off for 45 fucking minutes and calls it a day. And that's all that they needed to do with this album. And they did that and more. Am I saying this is the album of the year? Nope. Am I saying this is as good as Back in Black? To some of you, how can I tell? They all sound the same. But no. It's a good album. It's a passable album. In fact, it's way more than passable. I encourage multiple listens of this because I myself have done it. It's one that I'll definitely listen to a number more times. This is an album that definitely is worth its weight in price tag. And it was worth its weight, period. And it's one that is required here in 2014. One that's definitely needed and necessary to prove that this type of rock and roll can not only survive here in 2014, that Gene Simmons was fucking wrong, but it can thrive. Because the excitement, the hype, the buzz, the desire for a new AC/DC album after it was announced was magnificent. The reaction to a track such as Play Ball, which is honestly just kind of middling on this record, is magnificent. The album, it's worth the wait. You're wrong, Gene, once again. AC/DC, I would give the album a, I don't know, 7.5, 7.7. Like I said, ain't anything all that new. Man, was it necessary. I feel a lot better about rock and roll, knowing that rock or bust exists. Ooh!